Welcome to Sandbox FOMO5 from Buro Happold. Each week we pick short snippets from our most recent episode for your listening pleasure. These quick listens could be valuable insights, thought-provoking elements, or even practical advice that will no doubt enrich your life and knowledge. Sandbox brings together curious individuals interested in a specific topic to discuss, dissect, and interrogate it. The style is conversational, with experts from Buro Happold and invited external guests who will add another angle to the narrative. Listeners are encouraged to gather around our podcast so that we can explore the latest advances in various fields and expand our collective horizons. Sometimes we'll tackle a subject head-on, sometimes a sideways view, but always with curiosity, expertise, and who knows, maybe even a dash of humour. First of all, I want to ask each of you to tell me what makes a venue memorable and what are the criteria for a positive visitor experience. I'll go to Christine first.
Great question. From my point of view, being a building services engineer, not noticing anything I've done to make the building work definitely adds to the positive experience of people. Making sure they're the right temperature, very important. So almost, I don't want them to notice what we've been up to. I don't want them to feel the ventilation systems, the heating, the cooling. They need to just not be experiencing all that hard work that's gone into making sure they are the right temperature, or that the sound, they can hear the sound right, or all those bits that actually make a building work. If we get that bit right in the design and the construction or refurbishment of a venue, you really find that that user experience is second to none. But actually, they don't notice that all of that's gone on, which is sometimes a little bit disappointing.
You've got an interesting example, Christine, about Hyde Park Picture House and about talking to the people who actually use the space, because for them, temperature wasn't so much an issue, was it? Tell us what you were talking about before.
So the Hyde Park Picture House is a single screen listed historic cinema in Leeds, and we were commissioned to support the refurbishment of the building. It's about 100 years old, and the client was very, very worried that everyone was too hot within the space. So we needed to establish what the problems were. So we thought we'd survey the audience. So we gave them some questionnaires and we gathered feedback. And so this overarching issue of it's hot, it's stuffy, we need to deal with the air conditioning within the space. It was a naturally ventilated building and most of the natural vents had been sealed up over time, so they weren't working properly. What we found is when we actually surveyed the audience, all of those surveys came back saying it's too noisy. We can hear buses, we can hear planes, we can hear street noise, ambulances going past, and that's ruining our cinema experience. Nobody mentioned how hot or cold it was. So although that might actually have been an issue that the staff thought was a problem for the venue, the audience were finding the noise which was present every single time they had a cinema viewing, so it affected everybody all the time, was actually a much bigger issue for us to sort out with the refurbishment works.
Thank you, Christine. And Becky, you've been doing some fascinating work on the psychology of crowds and the way they flow. Can you just tell us, what is the optimal flow of a crowd through a place? How does the way we move through a space help our experience of it?
Like Christine said, when we've worked at a venue, you should not really be able to tell that we've been there and intervened in some way. So it should feel like a seamless experience moving through the entrance, through to the sort of orientation spaces and the exhibition content. I think part of that means cues at museums are inevitable. So we need to find ways to distract and entertain the crowd whilst they're waiting. The projects like the Urban Nature Garden at the Natural History Museum is a great example of that, bringing some of the content out into the queue space outside the museum so that people can engage with the content whilst they're waiting to go in. As well as that, I think it's the flexibility to cater to different diverse audience types now that are, coming and experiencing the museum. Some people really want to deep dive and read every single exhibition content. Other people want to skim through, quickly tick lots of things off their list and see as much as they can in the time available. And I think museums are becoming increasingly aware of this and offering like diverse exhibition content One great example, we recently worked with the Book of Kells in Dublin. So there is the Book of Kells in the old library where you have, the book, and then you have the interactive exhibition adjoined to that, which has got much more sort of interactive spaces where you can play and interact with the different exhibition content and have a different experience, which I think has been really, really successful.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Becky. And Alistar, I'm fascinated to know, how do your experiences and needs contrast between being a performer and an audience member when you're in one of these memorable venues, a theatre, say?
Well, I think we've all been the audience a lot more than we've been the performer, and I just happen to be a performer for a living. But firstly, I think I should probably apologise to Christine for driving my helicopter and my fire engine past the Hyde Park Picture House. But I was actually doing it to protest the temperature inside. So in the end, everyone was happy. But I think it's a very odd thing. I think the flow that Becky was talking about is really interesting. And outside being a performer, I went to a hospital with my wife for an appointment the other day, the Royal Free, and you just went, oh, this is how a hospital should have been designed, because the flow was just brilliant. It was almost, and I say this advisedly, my wife and I both kind of went, I quite enjoyed that visit to a hospital. And funnily enough, I mentioned what Becky had been saying previously about flow, because it's fascinating. For a venue, obviously, we're all ludicrous, egocentric, maniac show-offs. So one of my favourite venues is the Empire in Belfast, because it's an old music hall and it's fantastic. I think there's various things, like if you go to like the Comedy Store, one of the great comedy clubs, it's a low ceiling. Everything's concentrated on the stage. That's such a great thing about, especially if you go back to ancient Greece and go to the amphitheatre, up to somewhere like the City Varieties in Leeds, everything's focused on the stage. And when you've done gigs in a cafe on the Alps, everywhere, trying to make it work, suddenly doing it in a theatre is a proper theatre. Like, again, I said the Lyceum's the biggest West End theatre I played. I think it's 1,600. And every movement is exaggerated. Its effect, your 5-minute routine takes 10 because they're enjoying it more, because it's a really sort of almost, I hate to say sort of terribly pretentious, but sort of transcendental experience when you compare it to the venue I mentioned on Saturday. So it varies enormously, but as a performer, part of it is the joy of how well it goes, which is all to do with the people, but a lot of it is to do with what Christine said. People don't realise how much difference the space makes to what you're doing.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that quick dip into our last episode of Sandbox. Don't forget to subscribe to follow the show. You'll find Sandbox in all the usual places, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Buro Happold's YouTube channel, and on the Buro Happold website. What's more, if you want to join the conversation on X, known as Twitter to his old friends, use the hashtag BHSandbox. We'd love to hear from you on any of the topics discussed.